Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Leafs Talk Live. A couple weeks ago, we had Kasimir Kaskisuo, former goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs, on the show. And this week, we have a hockey legend and none other than Martin Biron. How you doing today, Marty?
Pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. A lot better now that you call me a hockey legend. I'm almost blushing over here, but I'll appreciate that. I don't think I've made it to that level, but I'll take it. You know, I've been retired a few years now, so the compliments don't come as easy.
We're excited to have you on, and this is going to be a great show. Throughout the show, if you're watching, feel free to drop your comments, your questions in the comments section. We'll get to as many as we can, but we've got a jam-packed show for you today. We've got a bunch of questions that Marty's going to answer for us. And we're going to start off fittingly as Martin Biron. He played for the Sabres majority of his career. He's on the radio often talking about the Buffalo Sabres. As you can see, I have a Sabres hat displayed back here. I wouldn't usually do that, but
I appreciate it.
It's for you,
I
Marty.
got my Islanders and my Flyers jersey behind me. That's in my kid's room. He's got a few things hanging over here. The Sabres jerseys around the corner, Rangers in front of me. But I live in Buffalo too, so I mean, I work in Buffalo, cover the Sabres. So I played here a long time, but I'm pretty experienced in the Buffalo everything now.
Yeah, Buffalo. It's a great city, and it's the Battle of the QEW. For those who don't know, the battle between the Maple Leafs and the Sabres, the rivalry. And personally, when I go to watch a Leafs game, oftentimes I go to Buffalo. I've seen Marty play before in Buffalo. I've gone to Buffalo for a lot of games. I saw Crosby get his first career penalty. Great memories in the city of Buffalo for me. Now, oftentimes when the Leafs are playing in Buffalo, it kind of seems somewhat like a Leafs home game to me, or at least a 50-50 split. You hear, it's like a college event. You hear, go Leafs, go, let's go Sabres. Now, you actually got to play in that environment. So, as a player, what was that like?
It's really cool. Listen, the Leafs travel well. So that it is Ottawa, Montreal, Vancouver, Colorado. They travel really well. Their fans are always there to support them. I played for the New York Rangers. Listen, with the Rangers, we would go down to Carolina and the place would be half of Ranger fans. So certain teams, especially the original six, they traveled really well. But being only 2 hours away, driving from Toronto to Buffalo, or even if you live on the west side of Toronto, more towards Hamilton or Kitchener or even London, Ontario, or whatnot, coming to Buffalo is a lot faster and a lot easier than having to go to Toronto. So a lot of the Leafs fans do that. Now, the energy in the building is pretty high up, and it's fun. As a player, you embrace it, you enjoy it. I think we saw, was it last year, where Jack Eichel scored a goal against the Leafs and told the Leafs fan in the front row to sit down? I mean, that's what we play for as athletes. We play for exciting games. I've played in front of 5,000, 6,000 people in a 20,000 building arena, and it's like there's no atmosphere, there's no energy. You have to create that energy. But when the Leafs come into Buffalo, the buzz is outside at 3:00 in the afternoon, 5:00, 2 hours before the game. There's a buzz. You feel it, you sense it, and I think both teams play their best because of that. Now the rivalry, Eichel Matthews, is really on display. Those two guys like to show up for those games, like to play their best. I think it's fantastic. So I absolutely love it. I know there's obviously people in Buffalo are going to, you don't like seeing that many Leafs fans in the building, but you know what? Certain things are bound to happen, and the Leafs in Buffalo is always going to have a really good showing. But I definitely like it when they go home. A little sad and upset because their beloved Leafs lost in Buffalo. That's the way I like it usually when they come in town.
Well, the last 2 times I went to Buffalo for a game, I went home pretty upset because 2 times ago, and actually the Sabres lead that series, the Battle of QEW, I believe. They lead the series. They're kind of I don't know. The Leafs just don't show up for half those games, and
I'll tell you this: it's fun to play in Toronto as well. Like you talk about the Leafs fans come into Buffalo, and it creates a huge, intense atmosphere. But going to Toronto, and when I played against the Leafs when I was a Sabres, you had Cujo in net. You had guys like Darcy Tucker. You had Matt Sundin. You had Ty Domi. I mean, the Ty Domi Rob Ray fights, is pretty cool. We actually did a feature last year on Sabres.com, and you can find it on the Sabres YouTube. It's Ray Domi, and it's all their fights, and they talk about it. I mean, that rivalry was not just in the fans, it was on the ice, and it makes it really, really fun.
yeah, there's a lot going on in that rivalry. Eichel Matthews, as you attested to earlier, it's a lot of excitement, and the Sabres are an up and coming team. I really believe that. I've listened to you on the radio a lot, and you've convinced me. You've
Oh,
convinced me.
good.
I mean, the signings that they've made this offseason, Eric Stahl, Jack Eichel's on the team already. Having Taylor Hall to go on a line with him, that's a really scary line.
It actually started with the acquisition of Eric Stahl, as you pointed out. Right there, I was like, wow, this is fantastic, because the Sabres had Jack Eichel is slotted as the number one center, and then there was a miss. Last year was Marcus Johansson as the number two center. He never really had played center a whole lot in his career. He did pretty well, but they trade Johansson to Minnesota and get Eric Stahl in return. This is a guy that, even though he's getting older, is not really slowed down. So I like that fit behind Eichel. You got Eric Stahl, and then you can – now you got Cody Eakin, which is a great acquisition as your third line center. So there's a lot going on. And obviously Taylor Hall puts him, right up there. And, so yeah, there's definitely a lot of excitement for the Sabres whenever the season starts, right? Everybody's waiting for the season to start at some point, hopefully in January. So I think the Sabres will be surprising and will be fun to watch.
I think so too. And we were just talking about how Eric Stahl signed with the Sabres, or was traded to the Sabres rather.
Yep.
I want to show a little clip of you and Eric Stahl here quickly.
Stay up on your feet, Stahl? Hey, can't stay up on your feet? What happened there?
That's a short version of it too. I say, you're a big boy. What are you doing falling all over yourself? And so this is already 14, almost 4, more than 14 years ago. It was in the spring of 06. So the 05-06 season, we're talking about the conference finals there. And in the second period, I believe, because it's going that direction. So in the second period, there was maybe there was a penalty. No, it's the first period, right? So it's the first period. There's a penalty in our zone. Jay McKee got his stick right by Eric Stahl's skate, really didn't touch him. Eric Stahl went flopping, and Jay McKee got a penalty for tripping. So then it's the ensuing power play, and he's right there at the point by the bench. So I'm a terrible trash talker. My chirps are awful. But it just so happened that this one was caught on microphone and on camera, and it was pretty good. So Eric Stahl, he didn't say much about it. And then, as you could see, it was on OLN. That was the American rights holder at the time. And one of the reporters came to me. He goes, "We got a great soundbite. Can we play it?" And they didn't need my permission, but they asked because there was a couple of curse words in it they had to bleep out. And I said, absolutely, I'm all for it. So they played it during the broadcast. So, I found a way to get involved in the game, even though I wasn't playing.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. That's a classic chirp. That clip is classic. I can watch that all day long.
Yeah, I've got that one. I have one with Crosby, but again, it's kind of like he's complaining about something and I'm giving it back to him when I was with the Flyers, but that one was just average. The Stahl one was way better.
Yeah, that one, you can't top that. So we were just talking about Eric Stahl, the Sabres, all their offseason additions. As a Sabres analyst, I have a question. What are your expectations for the Buffalo Sabres in 2021?
Well, it's the $1 million question every year, the last 3-4 years, because you always think, well, the Sabres are right there, right? they're going to knock at the door of the playoffs. They're going to be competing and play meaningful games in the month of March leading into April. That's like the big thing that all teams in the National Hockey League are saying right now is they want to play meaningful games in March, April, learn to compete for a playoff spot. Now, this is the first year I believe this is true. I don't know what the divisions are going to look like when, it's all said and done. They're talk about having a Canadian division. So obviously Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto will not be in the same division as the Sabres. But let's just see, for argument's sake here, that it was the same division. The Atlantic Division was the same division. Or we could even talk about the Eastern Conference. I think Tampa is still going to be good. Maybe not as good as they were last year, because they're definitely going to lose, a couple of guys here and there. But they're still good. Boston, I think, dropped a little bit. They've got some injuries. Toronto's going to be really good again. Montreal is going to be better. So you're looking at teams right now in the East and in that division, and you're saying, okay, can the Sabres be fifth in the division? Can they knock to be fourth in the division? Tampa, Toronto, Boston, maybe top three, Montreal right there. I believe the Sabres are better than Florida, than Ottawa, and then Detroit. So I think they're in the middle of the pack in the Atlantic Division. Again, wild card is, how is Taylor Hall going to fit with Jack Eichel? If these two are dynamic together, you elevate them even more. Victor Olofsson had a great season last year, over 20 goals. Would have been on pace for 30, I believe, if he played a full season. He got hurt a little bit. And plus, we missed the end of the year because of COVID. So I think he could be a 30-plus goal scorer, maybe even close to 40. So that's going to be a big thing for the Sabres. I'm not worried about their defense and their goaltending. I know everybody's up and roar about it, especially about the goaltending. I think the goaltending is fine, but I think the Sabres are going to score possibly 50, 60 goals more this year as a team that they did last year, which is going to put them in a pretty good company in their division if the divisions were to stay the same.
Yeah, I think for sure that the Sabres, they're going to take a leap this year, kind of like my Buffalo Bills did. I mean,
Yep.
I think the Sabres are legitimately going to compete for a playoff spot, and I think they're going to sneak into a wild card spot. It depends on all how the divisions are going to work out, like you were saying, but I see the Sabres being a legitimate threat come playoff time this year.
The big difference is if they are paired in a division with the Islanders, the Rangers, the Flyers, the Boston Bruins. I think they talk about those teams being in that same division. There's some tough teams right there. I mean, you still have to beat really good teams to be able to get to the playoffs and make the playoffs. So, but I think if, the rumors about the divisions are going to be true, it may make life a little bit more difficult for the Sabres. I mean, if they have to play Washington in that division as well, it may make life a little bit more difficult for them because there's going to be some really, really competitive teams there. But I think they're going to definitely knock on the door, and the door will be a little bit bigger open than it was the last few years.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of teams that are really going to be affected by the all Canadian division if that happens. You look at teams out in California. I mean, that group of teams, Vegas and Colorado, are just going to feast on them. And then in Canada, it's really going to be a tough division to compete.
It's
Toronto.
going to be really tough in Canada. You got Vancouver, who I think are a fantastic team. You've got Toronto, that's definitely one of the top teams, especially when you consider the offense that they can bring. Winnipeg last year had a tough year. Everybody likes to put Winnipeg up a little bit higher than maybe they should. I do the same thing. I love Winnipeg. I love their forwards with Scheifele, Wheeler, all of that. I love Connor Hellebuck. Their defense is a little suspect, but so you're talking about 4 or 5 teams. Calgary could be a bounce back. Edmonton could be a force. So really, the only team that's are not going to fare as good this year, but they're on their way up, is the Ottawa Senators. The other 6 teams are really, really competitive and could be really tough.
Yeah, I think the Senators, they caught a tough break with this all-Canadian division too, because I think, like you said, they're on the rise as well as the Sabres. I think the Sabres are definitely a couple years ahead of them, but the Senators, they took I think they improved this offseason as well.
They did. They did. Just not enough to be saying they're going to be, competing for a playoff spot, especially in that division. And who knows what the schedule is going to be like if they all have to play those 7 teams together. I mean, if you're Ottawa and every night you have to play Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver, uh, that's not easy. That's not easy to do this for a whole season. So it may be trouble in the nation's capital.
Definitely. Now we're going to move back to Buffalo for a second. This is Leafs Talk Live. This is going to be the last question I really ask about Buffalo. And we're going to move on to the Leafs and then more about Marty's segment towards the end of the show. And if you have any questions, you're watching this video, feel free to drop them in the comments section. But right now, you played with a legendary goaltender, probably one of the best, if not the greatest of all time, in Dominik Hasek. What was your biggest takeaway from playing with the Dominator?
And there's a lot of different takeaways. One, nobody could play like Dominik ever always did or ever did. I don't know if you remember, there was a commercial back in the days. It was a MasterCard commercial. There was skates, $200, pads, $1,000, gloves, $500. Having a slinky for a spine, priceless, right? And that's really what Dominik Hasek was. He was Gumby. He had a slinky for a spine. He could turn and spin in so many different ways. Nobody could do that. But what I learned most by playing with Dominik Hasek is 2 things. One, he worked extremely hard. I've seen him, and there's a great story with, I think it was Curtis Brown, who scored a goal in a shootout drill at the end of practice. And he celebrated like he had just won the Stanley Cup. And Dominik Hasek is competitive, and he works extremely hard. So Curtis was about to leave the ice, and Dom was like, you come back here, dump a bucket of pucks at center ice, and go ahead. And I think Curtis took literally like 50 breakaways and did not score on one of them. Dom was like, I am not letting you win this. I'm going to stop the next 50. So that was really what Hasek was. The second thing about Dom is, although he was quirky, although he threw himself left, right, upside down, legs behind his head or whatever, scorpion kick, he was very good technically with his skating. So if we did drills, and it was you start on the post and you push to the top of the crease and you come back to your post, you go post to post, back up. Like, his skating was really good, really fast, great edge work, especially for what we knew about edge work at the time. Now guys are absolutely crazy with their edges, but he was extremely good at moving and skating in the net. So for me, even though I couldn't lay down and flip my legs over my head and make, spinorama saves and all of that, I could learn from his skating, from how he moved in the net and how he anticipated the play and moved quickly into the position to make a save. It wasn't easy to be with arguably the greatest goaltender in the world, because in practice, the guys were like, if you want confidence, go down to Marty's end. And, well, if you want to be stopped, go down to Dom, because he'll stop everybody in practice. So that would, all the good goal scorers would come down to my end because they wanted confidence. They wanted to score goals. But he was definitely a treat to watch every night and every day in practice. And I was really lucky to have played with him for a couple of years.
That's great insight. I really appreciate that answer. And I guess skating as a goaltender, is that extremely important?
Extremely important. So Francois and Benoit Allaire, 2 of the best goalie gurus in the business. Mitch Gordon's another goalie coach that I had. They always talk about skating. And the Allaire brothers, one of their big bullet point when they teach goaltending is beat the pass. So basically, if the pass go from point A to point B, you have to have moved and be in position before or right on the time that the player receives the puck. If you're late, then you're not set. You're not seeing the puck clear. You're not in your position. There's a lot of holes. Goalies that give up goals like through their body, through their legs, usually are not set. Their skating did not keep up to what they needed to do. So beating the pass was always, what Benny Allaire in New York would tell Henrik Lundqvist would tell me, beat the pass, beat the pass, beat the pass. I mean, it's drilled into my head. So when I see a goalie that doesn't beat the pass, that that's all about skating, and it's one of the most important thing a goalie can do.
More great insight. So if there's any goaltenders watching this, make sure you work on your skating. You heard it here first from Martin Biron. So we're going to talk about some of the past teammates you've played with. We're going to kind of move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, make a transition here from the
Yep.
Sabres. So, having played with Joe Thornton on the gold medal winning 1997 World Junior team, can you give some insight as to what he brings to the Toronto Maple Leafs this year?
Well, I'll give you some insight from having to played with him in the '97, as you pointed out, but also, what Joe Thornton was like through his career and players that have played with him. When I think of Joe Thornton, I close my eyes. People may see the beard, or I see a smile. Joe Thornton is always smiling, always having fun. That's why he's so successful. That's why he's still playing. So we're at the '97 World Juniors, and Joe is younger than everybody else. He wasn't drafted at the time. I think he was 17 years old, and he was the 13th forward. Like, he was not used a whole lot. I was the backup goaltender, so our coach Mike Babcock was given the backup goalie a task to do and tracking something. So for me, it was face-offs. I tracked face-off. I had the chart. I still think that when Babcock was coaching the Leafs, he had the backup goalie tracked some things. I don't know if it was face-offs, but goalies always have a job to do, even if you're not playing. Stay in the game. So that was my job as the backup goalie with Team Canada. We're in Geneva, Switzerland, and we're on the bench, and I'm tracking face-offs. Joe Thornton's job was, because we would split the game up in 5-minute increments. So we want to win or tie every 5 minutes in the game. His job, so here's Jumbo Joe, big, goldeny hair like curled out of his helmet, and the big smile in his cage or visor, whatever he had. And his job was every 5 minutes, pump up the guys and say, guys, we won the last 5 minutes. Let's go win the next 5. Like, that was his job. He didn't play a whole lot. So here's Joe Thornton, future Hall of Famer, one of the superstar going to be in the National Hockey League. And his job is to pump up guys like Peter Schaefer, Brad Isbister, Danny Briere, Brad Larson, former Leaf Jeff Ware was on the team. I mean, that's what his job was, to pump up those guys and let them know that we were on track to continue having success. So, and he did it. He just loved doing it. So, I think Joe is the ultimate pro, one of the nicest guy in the National Hockey League. I heard a story the other day. He was in San Jose. A young kid got called up and walked into the room on game day, and the young kid's got one suit, right? And the suit looks a little raggedy, and Joe Thornton said, kid, tomorrow you come with me. And then Joe took him to the mall or whatever, to his suit guy, and got him a couple of suits, couple of shirts, ties, matching shoes. The next game, this kid shows up. He's looking sharp. He's feeling confident. And that was all because of Joe. So, a fantastic guy, amazing player, and even better teammate. So I always like watching him, and always love having a chance to talk to him whenever I can.
Yeah, a guy with a lot of character, it seems. And
yeah,
while he
Leaf fans are gonna love him, although he's not, obviously Joe Thornton of when he was with the Bruins and got traded to San Jose and had the fantastic year, and I think he had 90 some assists that year, like something crazy. But he's still very effective and will help a lot.
Yeah, and while he is off the NHL right now, he could be just sitting at home like most of the players in the league are. But he's over 40 years old, and he's still playing in Switzerland right now, because I just trying to.
And one of the best places in the world, by the way, Davos in Switzerland. That's a fantastic place to play. I wish when I was in the lockout, a couple of lockouts, I wish Davos would have called and said, hey, Marty, come play with us. I would have jumped on the plane and gone over there right away.
We have a comment here from Joseph Clark. You're an amazing storyteller, and I got to agree.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. You know what? it's so easy to tell the stories when you live them and they're in your memories. And I'm passionate about the game of hockey. I'm passionate about the sport, about teaching the sport. I love telling stories, and I'm a terrible joke teller. I'm a terrible guy, like in front of a crowd trying to tell a joke. But the stories that I lived, I can definitely tell them.
So we're gonna move on from a bit of storytelling. We'll get back to it,
Yep.
but I was wondering, what advice could you give to players going to the World Juniors this year?
One advice that I would give them is an advice that I got from my coach in junior. So you guys may remember in the early 90s, this guy, Joe Canale, coached the World Juniors team when, oh man, who was this guy? He had a captain. Anyway, like Joe Canale coached the World Juniors team, and then he coached me in juniors in Beauport. And I remember going to camp for the World Juniors, and Joe pulled me aside and he said, "It's really tough. It's a hard camp. It's physically tiring. It's mentally tiring. Any chance you get to just take a half-hour nap, go to bed early at night because you wake up early the next day, get your rest." And the very first year I went to camp for the World Juniors, I was nervous. I couldn't sleep a lot, and I was tired. I didn't perform well, and I didn't make the team. And then my second year, I went to camp, maybe not as nervous because I had gone through a camp before, but I really took that advice. If I could just lay down for 20 minutes and close my eyes, good. If it was just to, instead of watching a movie at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then you end up going to bed at midnight, go to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock so that you're fresh the next day, because it's a long tournament. It's a long camp, especially for the kids right now in Red Deer. I mean, they're going to be in camp for a month. It's definitely long. So get your rest in, because that's one of the most important part of being physically and mentally prepared for the grueling task ahead.
Yeah, not only should players going to the tournament, take your advice, but I should too. I don't get nearly enough sleep.
Oh, well, I like to get my 8 and sometimes 9 hours a night, and the last few days I haven't. So if I'm a little cranky, that's because of that.
So, as you can see right behind you, you've got a New York Islanders jersey there, and
Yep.
I'm gonna show a little picture here of a teammate Leafs fans might be familiar with.
Okay. Oh,
That
yeah.
that right there is an 18-year-old John Tavares
Yeah.
from back in 2009, his rookie season. You played with the current captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, John Tavares, and Leafs fans, they criticize everybody. It happens. I'll be the first to admit it. It happens. But I don't understand why anybody criticizes this guy, John Tavares. You played with him when he was just 18. Can you give some insight as to how he was as a leader? Did you see any leadership qualities in him at just 18?
Absolutely. So we show up to Long Island, for camp, and that year we just did our testing in Long Island, and then we got on a plane and went to Saskatoon for training camp. So the very first ice session in Saskatoon, we're doing a couple of drills, and Tavares is on the ice, I'm on the ice, and he gets in the clear, like it's a 2-on-1, and he gets like a mini breakaway against me, and I literally bit so hard on the fake move that he put in front of me that I slid to my right. He turned around and just put it in an empty net. And the crowd in Saskatoon that was watching practice just went, ooh, ah, like they were so impressed by this kid. His skill on the ice was amazing. His work ethic, his hard work was amazing. Stayed on the ice, stick handled pucks through cones, and did everything like that. He didn't have to. He was the first overall pick. He was, gonna be a superstar in the National Hockey League, but that those guys, the Connor McDavid, the Austin Matthews, the Jack Eichel, the John Tavares, they are hard-working guys. The other thing about Sidney Crosby, probably one of the hardest working guy in the league, still to this day, and you can see why he has success. The other thing, John Tavares, and what the leadership part that came is that he gets to New York, and one of the biggest Islander fans in the world is, I think his name is Kevin Conley. He plays E on Entourage. And so this guy's around, games and around us a little bit. And he kind of befriended like John Tavares and Matt Molson. Obviously, Tavares is going to be a superstar. And so, once in a while, Matt Molson would show up the next day at practice and be like, "You guys can't believe what happened last night." Like, what happened? He goes, "Well, JT got a text from from Entourage saying, hey, there's a big event going on in Manhattan, red carpet event. You should come by. Like, I've got a couple extra tickets. You and Maddie should come by and enjoy yourself and, come and hang out." And John Tavares is like, "No, you know what? We have a game in 3 days. I got to get my I got to eat well. I got to get my workout in. I got to get my sleep in. I'm going to do some video, whatever." Like, that's what he did. Like, it's really his commitment to the game and his commitment to success is leadership. So obviously, we're not as good as John Tavares, and if he's committed to his nutrition and his rest and his work ethic and all of that, well, we better be as well. So, Doug Waite was a great leadership with the Islanders, where Tavares learned a lot from Dougie Waite. So you could see those leadership qualities even as an 18-year-old.
Wow, those are some awesome stories. I love that. I mean, John Tavares, one of my favorite players of all time. I met him twice. I've been fortunate enough to do that. I met him when I was just a kid. He was playing in Oshawa at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Super nice guy. I got this jersey back here, signed at a Leafs practice. He seems like a class act kind of guy, and that fact that you just said 3 days in advance, that's some pretty intense stuff.
And it's also the surrounding that you're in, right? And I know a little bit about his family, but his uncle, John Tavares, the uncle, played lacrosse in Buffalo with the Buffalo Bandits for years. They're one of the ultimate top. He's Wayne Gretzky of lacrosse. Like, he's so good. And John Tavares, the uncle, just a nice man, like dedicated to his game, to his sport. Now he was coaching the Bandits. So you could tell that they have that in him, like their work ethic. That whole family has got that in them, and it makes them the best at what they do because of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So moving on from John Tavares, the great leader, the great captain, who's worth every penny of his contract, we're going to move on to another goaltender, and that being Frederik Andersen.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of criticism from Toronto, another guy who gets criticized heavily. And honestly, I get some of it. He's been extremely solid in the regular season, but it seems like every time we get to the playoffs, there's that one or two soft, trickly goals that just come at an untimely times. So does Frederik Andersen have what it takes to take this team to a Stanley Cup Finals?
I believe so. And listen, the thing with Freddie Andersen over the last few years is I think that he got tired. I think he played a lot of hockey, but not only did he play a lot of minutes in a lot of games, but he also played with a team that gave up a lot of scoring chances. Now, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know if the Leafs were seventh in scoring chances allowed or grade A chances, but I can tell you that from my memory of the Leafs team that played in front of Freddie Andersen is they gave up a lot of scoring chances, a lot of rebound chances. There's a lot of stress put on Freddie Andersen to almost be perfect, and to face a lot more quality or to play more quality minutes than other goalies that have life a little bit easier for them. So that's the thing, and that's tiring. And he played, almost top 5 minutes every year in the National Hockey League. So again, that's very tiring when you consider the second half of the schedule is usually, every other night, 14 games in 30 days, 13 games in 28 days in February. You have the bye week, but then you ended up playing 3 and 4 right after. It's pretty hard. And the Leafs have not had the luxury of a solid option at backup to give him a break on most nights. Carey Price, the same thing in Montreal, right? And they went and acquired Jake Allen this year because they're like, hey, we got to give Carey Price a break. He's got to play less, less minutes, and we got to play better in front of them. And then we saw in the return to play what that led to. Carey Price was fantastic. I think Freddie Anderson, number one, has the size. His technical game is strong. His movements are strong. So I think that a better rested Freddie Anderson will be better for the Leafs when they get to the playoffs. But sometimes you have to maybe mortgage the regular season a little bit and say, well, you know what, we're going to play Freddie Anderson more often because we need to get to the playoffs, and we can't, just take a chance because we don't have the right person behind him. But I do believe that he's a top goalie in the National Hockey League, and he has what it takes to make a run.
Yeah, that's generally been my thought over the past couple of years. I've been a little more hard on him recently, and maybe it's unfair. Our defense it's been a mess, and like you were saying, the backup goalie position. I hope Jack Campbell comes in and he can fill that role perfectly, but that remains to be seen. And sticking with the theme of goalie questions, so since the year 2000, only 14 goalies have been drafted in the first round. You were drafted in the first round, 15th overall, back in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think this number is so small?
Goalies nowadays develop a lot later. So where you can see like Shane Wright now, like he get exceptional status to play in the OHL at a younger age. John Tavares was the same way. Connor McDavid is the same way. Players can skip ahead because they're so skilled, they're so fast, and they can handle it. Goalies, I generally tend to think that they have to go about the level as to which they have to continue. So if you're a 14-year-old, you play 14U. If you're 16, you play 16U. If you're a 17 or 18-year-old, you may even play 18U and then go to juniors after. So it takes longer to develop. In the first round, you like to take players that you've seen a lot of. You can make better projection on them. And goalies are hard to project. They're hard to plan and say that goalie will be an NHL goalie, starting goalie in 5 years. It's very hard to project. So I think teams, number one, like to wait a little later for goalies in the draft because there's usually players that they know more about available for them. And two, they have to know it's a longer investment that you make. But also, you've seen it where goalies that are not even drafted, they're playing in Europe and they are, developing in pro leagues in Europe, or they're playing American college and they're 22, 23 years old playing college. And when they get out of college, they're more mature, they're more experienced, and then they get signed as undrafted free agents. So I think that the long game and the waiting game for goaltenders is more beneficial than drafting a goalie in the first round and putting a lot of pressure on that goalie. There is some goalies that are definitely first round material. Who is it? Spencer Knight, I believe, was maybe the last one to be drafted in the first round. Was it two drafts ago? Maybe. But there is some that are first round material, but teams like to wait on goalies a little bit longer.
Well, this year I was hoping to draft Yaroslav Askarov. He went to Nashville. I was really high on him. Unfortunately, we didn't get him, but I'm happy to have who we have. So one last question about goalies, because it's a comment here in the comment section. I'm going to change it up a bit. Have you gotten in a goalie fight? So I know you got in a fight with Ray Emery. Can you tell a story about that?
I was going to say, I mean, this is all over YouTube as well. The Eric Stahl clip is all over YouTube, but this brawl, the Ottawa-Buffalo brawl, was my last game in Buffalo with the Buffalo Sabres. I got traded to Philadelphia the next week, so that was my last time on the ice in Buffalo wearing the Sabres jersey. I got kicked out of the game for getting a goalie fight. So second period of a very entertaining, fun game. I believe we're up 3-2 in the game. Chris Drury comes through the slot in the offensive zone, so I got a really good look of it, and he's a right-handed shot, and he goes to take a shot. The shot misses the net to the left of Ray Emery to Ray Emery's right. And then I literally can count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Boom! Chris Neil comes across with a flying elbow, catches Drury in the head, blindside. This would have been a 25-game suspension in today's game. Like, literally, it was bad. And I listen, Chris Neil played the game hard and had a great career. For all the Ottawa fans that love Chris Neil, I would have taken him on my team. But that hit on Chris Drury, obviously, was a dirty hit. So catches him. Chris Drury is concussed, laying on the ice. There's a little bit of a brouhaha going on. Lindy Ruff is on top of the bench yelling at Brian Murray on the Ottawa bench. Rob Ray is doing the color analyst for the game. He's standing in between the two benches, hiding his microphone, like, and so we're at home. So we get last change. So Brian Murray puts Danny Heatley, Jason Spezza, and Mike Comrie on the ice. And Lindy Ruff is like, this is not going to go. So he puts Adam Mayer, Andrew Peters, and Patrick Kaleta on the ice. It was Patrick Kaleta's first NHL game, and we all knew he was an agitator. So I knew at that moment, and I was ready to fight. I was like, we're going to have a brawl. This is going to be back from my dreams of getting in a goalie fight and beating the crap out of somebody. This was the perfect scenario. One of the toughest goalie to ever play in the National Hockey League. I'm going to get in a fight with him. It didn't go well. Listen, it went a lot better if you watched Rick Jeanneret and the Sabres broadcast. If you watched the Ottawa broadcast, it did not go well at all. But it was pretty memorable. It was a great fight. I went down pretty quickly. Then Andrew Peters came over and fought Ray Emery. So Emery got actually 2 fights on the same play. I think he was given a 2 minutes for leaving his crease, a 5 minute for fighting, a 5 minute for fighting, a 10-minute misconduct, and a game misconduct. Like, he got 32 minutes of penalty on the same play, which is probably a record in the National Hockey League at some point for a goalie. So, it was a memorable fight. Did not go well, but it was pretty cool.
That's an awesome story. I wanted to ask about that, and I'm glad someone put that comment in there because I've been wondering about that for a long time.
And then I went to the locker room and ate chicken wings and pizza and watched the rest of the game on TV, and we won the game in a shootout. So Martin Gerber and for Ottawa and Ryan Miller for us went in the net. I think it was a 5-5 or 6-6 game that ended up in a shootout, and we won. Pretty memorable night.
Yeah, definitely. I remember watching it. That was an insane game.
Oh, yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about the Leafs, a lot about memories, a lot about the Sabres. We're going to get into a section of the show called More About Marty. We're going to learn a little bit more about Marty. So, who in your career had the biggest impact on you?
Oh, well, there's a lot of people. I mean, I was fortunate enough. My parents were great. My mom and dad grew up on farms in the country, an hour outside of Quebec City. But my dad had some natural physical ability. My mom did as well. They were both great softball players. My dad played men's league, and he was a really good player. So, my dad was my coach in baseball, youth, little league, was my coach in hockey for quite a few times. So my brother and I, we both played in the National Hockey League, which is pretty cool. So we had great parents that really led the way for us. So they had obviously a tremendous impact on our career and how we handled things in our career. But if I have, this is so hard to pick. But maybe when it comes to goaltender and playing the game, I would say François Allaire early and Benoit Allaire late. Like I was the type of goalie that played a little bit like Dominic Hasek, that laid down and poke checked and 2-pad stacked all over the place. And then I started working with François Allaire, and I started to learn to be more effective. I was I'm still 6'2". Wasn't a big guy when I played. I was 170, 175 pounds or whatnot, but I was 6'2". I was a tall, lanky guy. So I needed to learn to use my body in a more efficient way. And the butterfly, the Patrick Waugh butterfly and being on your knees, it needed to be learned. So working with Francois Allaire, going to his hockey school, teaching at his hockey school, I went over to the mountains, the French Alps, and the Swiss Alps, because we went up to Verbier in the Swiss Alps, and I was there 2 weeks with him at a goalie school in Switzerland. I mean, he really helped shaping my game and getting me ready to have a really couple of good seasons in the American League, play well in the National Hockey League. So I'd have to say, hockey-wise, Francois Allaire was probably the one that had the most impact on me, when it comes to being a goaltender and developing my game. I would say him.
Okay, so
He was the goalie coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs for a little bit. When Jean-Sébastien Giguère came over to Toronto, Frankie Allaire was the goalie coach in Anaheim with Giguère and developed, Jiggy won the cup and was the Conn Smythe in losing manner. So when Jiggy came to Toronto, I believe Frankie came to Toronto as well. So he was with the Leafs for a little bit.
Okay, awesome. So basically, take advice from your teammates, work with your teammates, and listen to your parents. That's what I've got from that.
Yeah, I played with three possibly Hall of Fame goaltenders: Dominic Hasek, Ryan Miller, Henrik Lundqvist, right? And the one thing that those three had in common, they were the hardest working player on the team. I used to hate being with Lundqvist for practice because I was the backup. I was older. And sometimes after practice, I was exhausted, and all I wanted was get to the showers. But there's the number one goaltender, an all-star. He's on the ice taking breakaways, being on the ice 30, 40 minutes after practice has ended, and he's still working, right? And I'm like, well, if Lundqvist can do it, I better do it. So I'm like in net and working harder. And then it becomes natural. It becomes normal. You do it without even thinking. So those three really had one thing in common. They were excessively good at what they did, but they worked harder than anybody else.
Awesome. So we're approaching the final 10 minutes of the show. If you have your final questions, final thoughts, leave them in the comments section. And we have some good comments here. This is a question I got to ask. I've heard some goalies can be weird before games and have pregame rituals or preparations that are unorthodox. Did you have something like this? I think I know the answer.
The answer is yes, obviously. But goalies are weird because, we play the game in a very individual way. We're by yourself. We don't have a line mate. We don't have a D partner. We're by ourselves. Even in practices, I'm at my end. The other goalie's at the other end. So it's very different. The weirdest thing about me throughout my career, and I wish I had them with me right now, they're in my garage, and I'm not going to bother go get them, but I had the same pair of skates my whole career. I'm talking not just the NHL, the American League, and 2 years of juniors. Out of my 3 years of juniors, my first year junior, I used a pair of skates. And then in my second year juniors, I got a new pair of skates. And that lasted me from 1995 all the way until 2013 when I retired. We're talking about almost 20 years, 18 years of hockey played on the same pair of skates. I would change the cowling, change the blade with the white shell that comes with it, but I used the same pair of skates, and I did not want to change my skates because they felt so comfortable. They were like an old pair of sneakers that I'm like, I'm not getting rid of these things. They are my best friends. I've lived through so many things with those skates. I'm keeping them. I probably should have changed because, number one, technology got much better. Blades and skates were more equipped to learn to use your edges and slide on your knees and do all of that. But I decided to stay with the same skates my whole career, and that's probably the weirdest, strangest thing that I have done throughout my career.
That's interesting. I've heard like a lot of players have them. And that's not too weird to keep the same skates. I mean, I get where you're coming from. Once you work them in, they're comfortable.
Yeah, but they get worn down. It got to the point where we couldn't even put any rivets in because the bottom of the skate, the sole of the skate, was all rotten out. I had to get them glued. Players now may go through 10 pairs of skates in a season. Maybe they go through 15 pairs of skates in a season. Skates are the foundation. They should be almost the newest best things you could get, because speed is key. For a goalie, the same thing. You got to get the edges. You got to get the right skates. So maybe I should have changed every couple of years, maybe 3 years, because I wasn't a guy that liked to change my equipment often. But to keep the same pair of skates 18 years, I hope one day I can. And I've reached out to the Hall of Fame about that, but I'm like, you guys should have a section of weird things, and my skates should be in there, because I don't know anybody that played their whole career with the same pair of skates.
Yeah, that's a long time for a pair of skates to last. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd wear the same socks until I had a game where I didn't score, which was
Yeah.
more often than not. But I had, I had my fair share of scoring streaks, and I'd just keep those socks glued to my feet for those games.
Well, I keep the same stick. When I won a game, I kept the same stick. And then there was a year in 05, 06 where with the Sabres, I won 13 straight games. I had the same stick for 13 straight games. The thing was like broken in a bunch of different places. So much that in the last 2 minutes of the last win that I got against Pittsburgh, somebody fell on my stick and it literally cracked, like broken in the shaft, right? And Jay McKee, who was the defenseman, he goes, Marty, you need a new stick. I'm like, no, it's totally fine. The thing was like this, like a wet noodle. And I finished the game with the stick one, but then I had to get a new stick, right? Because that thing was so busted for the next game, and I lost the next game. So go figure it out. It was really the stick that kept winning all those games.
That's wild. It was just the stick that kept running it.
Yep.
So, an interesting question. I'm an autograph collector. I'm going to ask this to every guest I have on this show. So, get used to this question. What is the weirdest autograph question or autograph request you've ever received?
I've had some pretty crazy one. One of the worst places. I was always very good with autograph seekers. I would go 5-10 minutes before getting on the bus, sign as many as I could, and I always was. It felt like that was part of the game, part of being a pro. In Long Island, it was a little different because the Marriott Hotel in Long Island, it was across the parking lot from the Nassau Coliseum. So you had to cross the parking lot, and there'd literally be like 30, 40 autograph seekers right there. And you'd sign a few autographs, and then they'd say, here, I made this plaque for you with a bunch of your cards. And you'd be like, oh, thank you. And you get the plaque, right? And they're like, so I'm going to be at the game tonight. Because I gave you the plaque, can I get a stick? And you'd be like, no, like I'm on a 5-game road trip. I don't have an unlimited amount of sticks with me. Thank you for the plaque. And then they'd say, well, next time I'll give you the plaque next time when you give me a stick. It'd be like, what are you doing? Like you gave me a gift and then you take it back because I'm not going to give you a stick. Like it was, and I have given sticks to some of those people. But sometimes you just are like, hey, listen, we're on the first game of a 5-game road trip. I got to save my sticks. And then they take it back. So that was pretty unique, but that's not the weirdest request. The weirdest request is somebody came up to me and said, can you sign this? And I'm like, well, what is this? He goes, that's a American Kennel Club certification. So for those that don't know what the AKC is, it's basically when you register your dog, and they get their papers, and then you can show them or you can breed them, and they get their real papers, their birth certificate and all of that. And they had named their dog something, Martin Biron, something, whatever. And they wanted me to sign the American Kennel Club paper just because they wanted to frame it. And I'm like, number one, like, what kind of weird little French poodle dog do you got that you're naming him Martin Biron? And number two, I was like, okay, whatever. So that was a pretty weird one that I had to sign as well. If that person is watching or listening, I hope you're not offended, but it was pretty weird.
That's crazy. That's an insane autograph request. Like I mentioned it, the weirdest thing I've ever gotten signed is just a lunch pail, and it had the Maple Leafs logo. That was signed by Cujo. That's not too weird.
And you're probably a kid, and you probably like had that as your treasure, right? Like your lunch pail, like that's your one item, and then you get a guy like Cujo to sign it. Like you're going for it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's 2 more questions I'm gonna get into, and then we're gonna sign off the show here.
Yep.
So, growing up as a Nordiques fan in Quebec, what team did you despise the most?
That's just about the easiest question you probably will ever ask me. It was the Montreal Canadiens. Hated the Montreal Canadiens, and I still do to this day. Like I cover the Canadiens with RDS in Montreal, and listen, I've a ton of respect for the organization, but at the time it was literally, we talk about the Battle of Ontario, the Battle of Alberta, the Battle of Quebec, Montreal, Quebec City was above and beyond everything. The brawl on Good Fridays, where in the playoffs they got a full-out brawl. Jerseys are ripped in half. Guys are being punched down to the ice. I mean, it was a mean rivalry. And probably because people don't know this, but Molson owned the Montreal Canadiens, and Quebec was owned by Carling O'Keefe. So it was totally different. And they obviously had the beer battle and the team battle as well. So that's where it all stemmed from. But I hated the Canadiens. I hated them when I grew up, and Patrick Roy was a fantastic goalie. I was more into Stéphane Fiset and Jocelyn Thibault and Ron Extall than I was into Patrick Roy, because he was Montreal and I could not stand it.
Hey, that's something we absolutely have in common. I despise those Montreal Canadiens. So we're going to get into one last question, and this is something that's applicable to me. It's a comment, and I appreciate this. From Sledge Hockey 101, what made Marty want to become an analyst after his retirement? And I'm going to add on this. For anyone trying to get into the sports journalism world, what advice would you have for them?
Well, see, for me, my path was different. Obviously, I did not go to school for that, but I feel like I had a 15-year education in the National Hockey League, because I paid attention, I listened, I talked to reporters, I talked to analysts. One of my ultimate model is John Davidson, right? He was a great goalie with the Rangers, then analyst with MSG. Now he's the president of the Rangers. So I had done some TV work, but I lucked into it. Like, I love the game of hockey. I watch hockey every night, even when I was, playing in the National Hockey League. Like, some guys don't watch the game. They don't watch the highlight shows in the morning. They just worry about their own thing. I watched it and consumed hockey all the time. So I lucked into it. The year I got traded to the Flyers, we finished last, missed the playoffs, and TSN was doing some playoff coverage where they invited players to come and sit on the panel, and they invited me, and I loved it. I was with James Dutty and Bum McKenzie and Darren Dreger, Ray Ferraro, Aaron Ward at the time. Like, I loved it, and it was great. So they asked me to come back. They asked me to come back a few more times, and then when I retired, they called me and say, "Do you want to do some work with us?" And I wanted to. That was my passion, was still to cover hockey, to be in the game of hockey. So that's where it led me. But so I will say this for people that want to be sports journalists. Number one, and that's what I keep doing now. Appreciate the game right now in 2020, but also think of where the game will be in 5 years down the road. Because there's so many development with analytics and new ways to talk about the game and teach the game. So try to learn about those things. Not that they will become 100% of the game. There's still the aspect of watching the game, having played the game, or having some experience with asking the right question and breaking it down. But learn about what else is coming down the road, so that you can be prepared and that the game is not going to pass you by. That's really an important thing when you cover the game of hockey.
I really appreciate that answer. As I said, I'm trying to get into the sports journalism field. That's my dream job. Grew up being a huge hockey fan, baseball, football, you name it. I love the sports. Huge Maple Leafs fan, huge Bills fan. You definitely have the personality to be on TV. I've always loved watching you on TV, loved watching you as a player. And this whole show has been amazing. It's been a great segment to have you on here. Hopefully we can have you on again sometime soon, and maybe do a preview of the next time the Sabres play the Maple Leafs. That'd be a fun little segment.
Maybe a playoff series between the Leafs and the Sabres. That would be. We definitely have to break that down then, for sure. But good luck with the show. Good luck with continuing to to want to be in that field, and stay safe with everything that's going on. And thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Thank you to everyone for watching this video. If you haven't already, hit the like button, smash the subscribe button. Thank you all. Thank you, Marty. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.